Hello and welcome to Higher Ed Live. I am your host, Seth Odell, coming to you live from Southern New Hampshire University here in Manchester, New Hampshire. We are in the Mill Yard, downtown Manchester. Thank you guys for joining us. Right off the bat, I want to dive in and thank our sponsors for Higher Ed Live. Higher Ed Live is sponsored by Integral, the creators of the Schools app on Facebook, a private Facebook community to boost enrollment and retention. Check out the latest research on Class of 2016 Facebook communities. Link went out to that with the hashtag Higher Ed Live. We're also sponsored by Omni Update, the leading web content management system CMS provider for higher education. The company's web CMS OU campus. It's secure, it's scalable with great tools, features, and deployment flexibility, and awesome user community. Check out a really great blog post that one of their developers, Shahab, wrote recently on why you should care about XSL. Cool stuff. If you're not familiar, definitely check it out. We're also sponsored by Scavenger, a Google-funded mobile game about going places, doing challenges, and earning points. Can you replace the traditional campus tour with Scavenger and provide a richer student experience? Well, that's what some folks at Oakland U did. At least they think they did, and it's pretty interesting. So definitely click that link out on Twitter, check it out, and give it a read. Okay, guys, first off, thank you so much for joining us today. We're having a little bit of trouble with Twitter on my end, so if you guys are able to watch this, I'm watching the feed. Please go ahead and tweet out, share the link. We'll be sharing it as well, but make sure folks know that they can tune in and be a part of this conversation as well. What we're talking about today, we're talking about student services in a distance learning world, and as you can see, I'm not alone. So off the bat, let me welcome my guest, Matt Thornton, the Director of Student Success here at SNHU.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Psyched.
I'm really happy to have Matt on the show. I wanted to have him on for a while. He's someone who's been a big part of my time here at SNHU, who I've worked really closely with. And I really kind of want to let people look under the hood a little bit with us, but also talk about a bigger issue in the industry. Talk about how do you approach student services in general when you are working in a distance learning environment. When students aren't just in a classroom and they can't always walk down the hall and knock on a door, it kind of flips the whole model a little bit on its head. So Matt is one of the main people here at SNHU who's looking at what the heck do we do with that then? How do we approach it and make sure that students are having the best experience, getting the best outcomes? And there's a lot to address with that conversation. So because of that, I'm actually not doing a weekly five on social shout. I want to dive right into the topic. We've got a lot to cover today. So first off, Matt, as we just go in, just tell me a little bit about yourself and your role in general at SNHU for folks watching.
Absolutely. Well, my role, as the Director of Student Success, when we first invented this position, it didn't exist before. We were thinking, what we could do to really take a look at the total student experience and the whole student life cycle, and to be able to sort of look at all of the pain points that students encounter along the way and figure out ways that we can empower our students with better tools and better services in order to make them more successful when they hit those points. So, I have a background. I started in academic advising. I was an associate dean of advising for a while. I was a registrar of a college for a little bit. I've worked in admissions before as a director of admissions, and so I've seen a lot of different areas of the student life cycle, and so this was a really exciting opportunity for me to be able to jump in and really kind of figure out what the future of student services for our students is going to look like. And so you're right. With online education, the big thing is that, distance ed students, they have completely different needs and values from your traditional students, and you have to kind of throw out a lot of your traditional ideas and think about new ways to deliver student services in order to better meet their needs and values. So that's kind of what I'm here doing, is really reinventing student services and seeing what we can do to make them more successful.
And the awesome thing is to be able to see that transformation, I think, at SNHU. We have been online for a very long time. I think we're talking about the 90s here. We're a campus that's been innovative from day one. But that said, we also have we had a primary traditional model on campus that's still very much there, very vibrant. But so the model of advising kind of grew out of that, it seemed. To be able to be a part of this frontier where we're really looking at how can we change that is really exciting. So as we dive into it, can you give a brief snapshot of kind of what does advising look like currently for SNHU?
Yeah, definitely. With advising right now, we have academic advisors assigned to all of our students, and they work within programs. So if you're an undergraduate student in a business program, you're working with an undergrad business advisor, and that makes a lot of sense because they're able to, really deliver, meaningful information to those students and become subject matter experts in their field of content. So they can help them a little bit with career advice, really understand the courses inside and out, and those advisors, they work with a population of right now about 300 students per advisor. What we're doing right now is we're recognizing that the first 6 months in the student life cycle is so critical to persistence and success. So we're experimenting with this idea of an onboarding advisor, and this is a new student advisor who's going to be working with the students as they're coming in and work with much smaller caseloads. So they'd only work with about 100 students, and by doing so, they're able to really dive into those students' lives and figure out, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, what makes them tick, what motivates them, and create a much more meaningful relationship with the student to really be able to help them succeed through those first 6 months. Because once we're able to keep them beyond those 6 months, they're much more likely to persist and to graduate. So this onboarding advising program has been really exciting. In a lot of traditional schools, they focus on what's called the first year experience. And it's the same kind of a theory, but in higher ed and with continuing education students, our students are older, they have, different lives going on. They're about 34 years old for the most part with our students, so it's a different population, and we need to make sure that we're really, focused on them. And because things happen so quickly in their lives, we really only got about 6 months to lock them in. So these onboarding advisors are going to work with them, figure out how to help them and how to make them more successful.
And I definitely think that's a really cool and interesting idea of focusing on the onboard advisors. I think there's, like I said, there's really interesting student needs at different points. One thing I just want to pull up, just give you a little hat tip. One of our regulars who was actually on the show just last week, Elena, saying, had a really positive experience so far with her advisor, SNHU. She's on the social media MBA. So, and I agree. Most of us know I'm actually in the MBA program too, and I've had a really great experience. The team here is just really personable, really passionate, which is exciting. So first question comes in before we even move on. Let's bring it up. So the first question is onboarding advising sessions. Are they done through Skype, email, phone? Like, what's a snapshot of what does the onboard advising experience a little bit kind of look like?
Yeah, the answer is yes. It's done with Skype. It's done online. It's done through email. It's done through phone. It's really whatever works best for that individual student. And that's what's so great about these advisors is they get to learn the students and figure out what their preferred method of communication is. So we really prefer that the first contact with these students is over the phone because we want to have a good 45-minute, hour-long phone call with that student. And it's kind of weird, in the advising theory, they refer to it as intrusive advising. I don't like the word. It makes me a little bit uncomfortable, but the theory makes sense because it's really getting in and figuring out, what makes that student unique and what we need to do to help that student be successful. So we call it sort of aggressive helpfulness, right? And so we work with the students and we're aggressively like, hey, we're going to help you, but we need to know all these things about you. So the first conversation, we want it to be on the phone so that they develop that meaningful relationship with their academic advisor. And then if they prefer to, contact over email or Skype after that, awesome, we could do that. But Skype is really a beautiful thing. We want to be able to use more video conferencing technology for all of the support services that we offer because we think that's the best way to kind of get that face-to-face feel without actually being on campus because obviously my students are time zones away. So it just doesn't work like that. So yeah, all of the above. It's whatever works for that student.
Totally. It's true. I was talking to a student of ours on an island called Tinian off the coast of Guam. And she was saying that she IMs with her advisor every day, and she just loves Instant Messenger, and her advisor was like, cool, I'll get on it, we'll talk. So it is kind of neat that you can meet the students where they are. I'll say that first phone call, when I started the MBA program, they made me do that phone call. I was kind of like, I kind of know what I want to do, guys. I don't know what to talk about. But it was actually really helpful as Ryan called me, and we had a good conversation, and it was helpful to really make sure you understood my goals and understand where my strengths and weaknesses were, so he could say, okay, here's programs that might be more challenging. Almost map out potential needs that I'd have, which was cool. So I give it now. So before we even get any further, I want to ask an open-ended question, which is, what are the needs of the distance learning student? Because we're still talking about students. So on some level, I'm sure it's the same as traditional campus students. But where is it different? What are the needs?
Exactly. So, in terms of the basic services that we provide, the needs are the same. They need career services, they need tutoring support, they need academic advising, they want, maybe some connection to a wellness department or something like that, admissions. We have what's called the one-stop that handles all of our financial aid and student account stuff. So the services are all the same, and that's where the similarities are. But the differences are that you need a completely different delivery model, right? Because with our students, for adult learners, we really live in what we call a just-in-time world, right? They're coming home from work just in time to pick up the kids, just in time to get them to the soccer game, just in time to get dinner on the table once they get home, and that's the world that they live in. So we need to be able to provide services to them in a just-in-time methodology, which is kind of hard to do given sort of, the traditional approach that most schools have been taking. You call career services and you make an appointment to come in and do a one-on-one resume review that may occur a week later. And so our students are looking for more real-time engagement and real-time services. So that's the big difference, is how do we provide it to them in that way and make all the information accessible to them so that they can quickly get answers to the questions they have just in time, right? So one of the things we've been doing is really focusing on, like I said, we're looking at the first 6 months of that student experience and really focusing on orientation activities and being able to provide students access to information that they need quickly. So we've created all these orientation videos that are 2 or 3 minute video clips, so they can go and pick and choose the materials that they want to watch, right? With traditional orientations, you sit in a room for a couple of hours, you're bored to death because you don't need to know half of it. And even with online, when they started moving orientations into an online format, it was often, let's hold a webinar for an hour and a half, or here's an hour-long video that you can come in and watch. But again, if they only need that 2 minutes of information that starts at minute marker 45 in this hour-long video, they've just wasted 45 minutes of their life that they will never get back. So we wanted to provide it to them in a way that it's quick, it's accessible, it's easy to find, and that way they can get the help they need when they need it.
So not to simplify it, but it does seem like then that you're approaching the students' needs the same reason that whether or not they need or they desire or prefer distance learning, but I mean, distance learning, one of the benefits for online education, obviously, is it's on demand. It's kind of anytime, anywhere on your schedule.
Exactly.
And so does it seem like that the services then have to almost reflect those needs as well? We can't tell a student, like, okay, great that you can take distance learning, but you can only have advising at 2 p.m. or you can only take this orientation for an hour, and then that doesn't obviously reflect the kind of what you're going for with distance learning, which is on your schedule, at your location, wherever you are.
Right. And obviously the goal is to be able to provide them with 24/7 access, and it's a little bit more difficult to do when you're looking at academic advisors and trying to staff advisors around the clock. I mean, it's difficult, but we do look at when our advisors are making calls to the students, when they're actually getting through to our students, and we build our staffing model around that so that we can have our advisors here when they're needed the most, and we make sure that they're spread out so that we can at least hit every time zone in the United States. So our students in California can still get help at 8 o'clock at night, Eastern time zone. So yeah, we definitely look at all those things to make sure that we're helping them out.
Yeah, I think that the staffing thing is so interesting to see. That's just the challenge here, which is too that we're growing really quickly.
Right.
Distance learning in general is expanding. So how do you grow a model while it's still being built? Which is, yeah. You love the challenge, and I'm so some people are so terrified of it. But it's like
Well, that's the kind of neat thing about being here is we're not afraid to fall flat on our face, and every now and then we're going to do something and it's not going to work, and we say, okay, well, what didn't work about it? And it's about a continuous improvement in process. But you have to try it to see what's working. And what's nice about in terms of our staffing models is we've been able to kind of capture better data and analytics into when we're getting our phone calls and actually reaching the students. Right? We've got a new phone system so that we can see how many calls are being made, the times a day they're being made, how long those phone calls are taking, and those kinds of analytics so that we can really build, make well-informed decisions about our staffing model.
And that's something that you guys are going to, I think, hear throughout the show is just the string of data, data first through everything. That we really try to measure what we can to see where those pain points are, where there's opportunity to do more. So one thing is when you talk about so what is advising? Big question brings up kind of another step, which to me is the importance of not just approaching advising, obviously, by taking the right class, and are you doing well in the class, and how are you doing with with your classes? Is there more to it than that? How do you and how do you approach community? Because advising on a traditional campus, there's something to be said about walking into a student union and having your resources there, and having kind of I don't want to simplify, but I was talking about having your formal advising and then your informal. And your informal might be a study session with some friends or just running into somebody in the hallway. How do you try to capture, in a distance model, this sense of community that's obviously prevalent in a traditional model?
Absolutely. Distance learning is very isolating, right? And I know that in my higher ed experience, when I was taking online classes for my master's degree, and now that I'm doing it for my doctorate, those particular schools have not done a very good job of building that sense of community for me. And so I don't feel like that college is something that, I'm a part of. I feel like it's something I go to do, and then I check out when I'm done with my class, and at the end I get a degree, and there it is. It's great. But, the reality is that when you look at the traditional retention theory, it definitely shows that engaged students are more likely to persist. And so you need to make sure that you're getting them acclimated faster, and you need to make sure that they're feeling a part of that community and they're really engaged in that community. So the way to do it is to make sure that you're able to connect students with each other, connect the student support services to the students in a way that they're engaging in real time. What we've done at SNHU, and it's kind of interesting, is we built all the courses so that they're completely asynchronous. And for the courses, that makes a lot of sense because our students need to be able to access the courses whenever they see fit. But there's definitely a synchronous component about going to school that we're kind of missing right now. So what we want to be able to do is build into our student portal different social media tools so that we can better connect our students. So that's one of the things we're looking at doing right now, is building the student union, where we're going to have a news feed. You'll be able to connect with different groups and follow different groups. You can follow staff members, you can follow other students. I mean, the idea is, when the students are in the classroom, they're in that class for 8 weeks, and then they log out of that class, they're done, and they're in a whole new class with a whole new set of people, and they don't maintain those relationships afterwards. So we want to figure out better ways to keep it so that they can maintain those relationships. And the reality is that your learning management system, it's not the best tool to do that, because it's so focused on what's going on in the course and what's going on in the classroom. So what we're doing is looking at these different tools like video chat, looking at the news feed we were talking about, and different things like document sharing to create more collaborative learning spaces.
And just one point to share, we did an internal survey. I will share that this one. We had 70+% of our current students that responded to the survey were saying they were already using Google for document sharing, right?
Or some form,
or some
form of Google.
Yeah, and so the fact that they're sharing documents with students already is showing that there's this stuff's going on, and it shows there is a limitation with a lot of learning management systems out there right now. And I don't mean to oversimplify, but there's a reason why they don't hold traditional classes in a student union, because you have different places for different needs. And it's something like, an LMS on some level still needs to have this safe zone. I mean, I know a lot of students, myself included, my wife trained me on this, is very, okay, what are they looking for, whether it's a rubric, what else they're providing, like how can I really nail this? And so sometimes if we had for one class, I think it was message board based, obviously, and people weren't always open to having super casual conversations on the message board, because you're like, well, this is kind of my teacher's listening. It's just if you're raising your hand in class and you're saying something.
Right. It's that formal learning environment, and they don't want to be able to share that more personal stuff in there. It feels awkward to them because they feel like the instructor's constantly looking and that they're going to somehow grade them based on those informal conversations. Right.
Yeah. I honestly think this is one of the biggest challenges facing online learning right now in general. Is how to not, because again, some students may want a more isolated experience, but I'm finding more and more students we talk to that's not the case across the board at all. People want to connect. we have Elaine and Lane talking right now, both SNHU students, talking about how they study together, they're on Twitter, they're connecting. I do think there's this sense that you want to have a chance to connect. More and more on Twitter and on Facebook, we're seeing students reach out to each other. And the reality is going to school is one of the most exciting and challenging chapters in someone's life. Right. And you don't want to, some people might, but I don't want to go through it alone. I want to connect with people, especially. Exactly. And it brings up another thing. Just another question, but those relationships are valuable beyond just your academic performance. It's the sense of community just builds not only the sense of family around the brand, but even things like you're building your resume, building making connections. Everyone says if you're going you're going to school, make connections. Build up your portfolio, your network, and there's still ways to do that in the distance learning model. But it's I think that's just evolving.
No, most definitely. And one of the things that I almost regret about the master's program I did was when I came out of it, I didn't have that network at all. I didn't have anybody that I kept in touch with. If I was looking for a reference from one of my instructors, I actually was at one point, and he emailed him about a year later, and he was like, "Yeah, to be perfectly honest, I don't even really remember who you are." And I was like, "Are you kidding me? I was in your class, I got an A, you sent me this awesome email at the end of this class, and you don't even remember me. That's awesome." So yeah, we want to be able to give them that opportunity to keep that connection.
SNHU. That's right. That's
no way are we going to do that here.
I agree, and I think that there is a sense of I hear more people staying in touch with their professors, and part of the thing that's great is we do have a lot of professors that are online and on Twitter as well. So we have Jessica Rogers, we have a lot of folks that are out there tweeting, they're connecting with their students, beyond the class, which is the same thing. I don't know, it's just really exciting. I think I look back on a couple key professors in my academic career that made a difference. And I would hate to think that if I was in a position where I went with the distance learning model because it just fit my lifestyle better, it was more realistic, that I would lose out on that. And I think it's an exciting challenge that everyone needs to look at, saying we need to make sure that doesn't happen.
Definitely. And I think what's neat is that we are seeing that the students are wanting to connect, but the problem is because we're not providing them with the tools to do that, they're having to look at outside tools to keep connected. And so what we're saying is, well, what if we were to build that community and provide them with the tools within their student portal so that they don't have to go out and figure it on their own? And that was one of the things we found when we did that survey with the students. The students, they're already using Google Docs for collaboration. Well, why wouldn't we just provide them with those tools so that they can get into them through My SNHU? That's our student portal, My SNHU. And, it just is one of those things where they kind of go out to find their own solutions. And there I feel like we're doing our students a disservice by not providing with those solutions up front.
Yeah, right? I totally give them an opportunity. And certainly if students want to connect on their own outside, they're welcome to. But
of course,
there's a huge benefit in centralizing opportunities for connections and not leaving it up to the student alone to go out and go above and beyond to create those opportunities.
Absolutely. And the other thing is what's kind of neat about the online world and being able to provide them with that platform is it also gives us a way to kind of measure that engagement, right? Because we're all about data, we're all about the analytics, and somehow we want to be able to measure that engagement and see how that engagement ties to student success. So what I'm doing in my doctorate program right now, is a focus on, is a Doctor of Science in Information Systems, and we focus on decision support systems and knowledge management. So we're looking at different prediction models that, can help take student information system data from the learning management system, and then hopefully data from this online student union, connect it all into a more robust prediction model that looks at the total student experience and see how those variables tie to student success.
And I don't mean to stop because that was really fast, but we just had a great tweet come in. So it says, social media is an obvious first thought, but the challenge is how to leverage it. And that's exactly what you just hit on, is how do you leverage those opportunities to then measure and actually connect it. So I gotta have you hit that last point again, because so how do you leverage social media to actually make a difference? Talk about that model a little bit. Okay. That to me is kind of not the holy grail, but that's the sweet spot. That's what we're going.
No, it definitely is. So when you look at the prediction models that are out there, right? Okay, so the prediction models that they've built, and there are some brilliant people out there doing it. One of the people that graduated from my doctorate program, Rajiv Bukralia, he just came up with this awesome prediction model that pulls your demographic information from the student information system, but it also pulls data from the learning management system. So how many times you've logged in, how much time you spent in your courses, points earned out of points attempted, those kinds of things, and then comes up with a prediction model that predicts student dropout in courses, right? So, and then there's other models like Rio Salado in Phoenix, Arizona. They've got this awesome model that it doesn't look so much at the demographics, but it looks at least in the learning management system, looking at, again, logins, time spent, and the grades that you're earning in the classes, and it gives that student a red light, a yellow light, or a green light, depending on whether or not they're on track to be successful, right? But when you go back and look at all of the early retention theory, that engagement, the ability for the student to get engaged with the culture and get connected to the culture, on a traditional campus, if a student moves into a dorm and they can't get used to that life and being on the dorm, or they feel too far away from home, or they feel like they don't have any friends, then those are all red flags that student's going to drop out within their first year. So, it's kind of the same thing when you get online. When you're online, if we can get you engaged and show that you are, working into a network of peers because we've recommended groups for you to join, if you're following certain, threads in the news feed, if you're connecting with student services online, we now have a way to measure all of those things. And if we can measure all of those things, we can put them into these prediction models that really captures the whole total student experience. And so that's kind of what my dissertation is going to be focused on, is pulling information from both the online student union, and then also what we're doing is a customer relationship management system. The CRM system is going to be tracking all of our interactions between advising on the students, tutoring on the students, all of our on-campus support, and the student. And as we measure these interactions through our customer relationship management system, we'll be able to pull those variables into the prediction model as well. So we're really coming up with the holy grail of prediction models. And because we want to know what the variables are that drive success, right? We want to know what those triggers are that are going to lead to success so that we can better steer our students.
So that is, I think, one of the most exciting things ever. So essentially saying you can utilize that, all those touch points and all that data to figure out where a student's at. And the best part is then to relay that information also back to the student. I know in both models, online or on campus, that sometimes it's hard to know where am I, how am I really doing, and to have a system almost of checks and balances where it's saying you also know where you're at, you have an idea of what's going on. Even just common things like you've only logged in once this week, you need to be logged in 3 times. You should try logging in more, or giving suggestive tips or suggestions in general. I think it's really interesting. It's really exciting. So before we move on, you brought up one point though. So you did say helping students be more successful. I think we need to say this. So what is student success? I mean, I feel like we should
your term, isn't it?
It is, exactly.
Define that.
It's
right.
good, I think, to tackle as big as loaded a question as
Right, it definitely is. So that's one of the things that we really work with on the individual level with the student during that initial phone call, right? So the onboarding advisor, they contact that student, and we've got to kind of figure out what that student's definition of student success is. Because for some of our students, it's just, hey, I just want to come in, I just want to take a few classes, and then I want to be done with it. I'm not looking for a degree, I'm just looking for a few classes. Other students are looking for a degree. Other students are looking for a degree that really affirms all of this life experience that they've already got, right? They've got all this life experience, but they can't get a job because for whatever reason they don't have that piece of paper, so that's what they're looking for. Student success might be a career changer. It might be a new career. It could be, you know, that they want to just graduate and learn for the fun of it. So, I mean, you really have to look at it at the individual level. I mean, for some of our students, it's going to be, I just want an A on my first paper so that I can really feel like I can accomplish something. So it's figuring out what that is at the student level, and then helping steer the students toward that. But we measure student success in so many different ways.
And I think that's the best. I mean, obviously, it should be the same in any model. The student success is what the student defines it as for themselves.
Yep, exactly.
And the advisor's job is there to help them define it. That's, again, why I talk about having that phone call early.
Yep.
Because a lot of times I want to go out to school, and I think I know why, but it's important to talk about that. I mean, I met a really great one of our students up in Maine, who's a writing student, who talked about how he almost dropped out, and his advisor to call with him, and wasn't pressuring, said, listen, if you feel like you need to drop out, we support you, but let's talk about what we talked about, a year ago. You said you really wanted this for these reasons. It's like, has that changed? And he's like, no, it hasn't. It's like, has it just gotten harder balancing with your life? And he's like, yes. He's like, well, do you want to keep trying? And he's like, yes, I do. And it was like this light bulb. He was telling this to the student that was still with us. But he said this because it's kind of like, sometimes you get bogged down and you forget, like, what is going on? Why am I doing this a little bit? And it's really, really amazing. And I think it's just really an interesting thing to do. So I want to pivot for a second and tackle another big point, which is academic performance and tutoring.
Okay.
Because that clearly is, a major point of student services in general and academic advising, making sure students are performing well, taking the right classes and doing well in them. How are we as an industry approaching right now, tutoring and advising in that sense for distance learning students?
And that's okay. So a huge challenge, obviously, because the one thing you want to be able to do is connect with that student on a level that it still feels like face-to-face tutoring support, but the reality is that you can't do that because they're at a distance. So there's a few different tools that we use at SNHU, and we're certainly looking at others and kind of experimenting with a few different things. One of the big ones that we use as our sort of like our third-party vendor tutoring system is called Smart Thinking, where students have 24/7 access to an online tutor. They can get connected with the tutor for whatever program or course it is that they're studying, and it's a neat system because it gives them whiteboard sharing. So if they're working on math problems, they can draw them all right up there. So at least it's happening synchronously, and the student can access it at any time. So Smart Thinking is great. It's a little bit tricky to get into because you need all kinds of passwords and things like that to get logged in, and that's one of the things I kind of struggled with this system is we want it to feel sort of like one quick, easy access experience. So another system that we're an organization that we're working with is OpenStudy, and OpenStudy is phenomenal. They have this online, it looks like a social media platform. You can log into different chat rooms depending on whatever the course of study is, and you can post a question right there. It pops up in a newsfeed, and within seconds, because you've got anywhere from 100 to 200 other people in this room with you at one point, you will see one person viewing your question, two people viewing your question, one person responding to your question, and then within 5 minutes you usually have at least one answer, if not 3 or 4 different answers from different students. So what it does is it leverages peer-to-peer support, and then sort of that pay-it-forward mentality as well, because if I see a question up there that I go, oh wait, I know how to help this guy with that, I'm going to go in and answer that question for him. So I love OpenStudy. It's a neat thing, and what I like about it is when you get 3 or 4 different answers, as a student, I can go, I can see how you got the answer there, and I can see how you got it there, but this way really resonates with me, right? If you have things explained in several different ways, one of them is going to resonate in such a way that you really learn it and you really retain that information. So
and the
that's
thing
a cool thing.
I love about that is one of the things that's challenging with any student that's looking for information online, it's easier than ever to find the answer.
Yeah.
So but to help them learn how you get to the answer and let them find the way that makes the most sense to them is huge. That's the light bulb moment when they're not going to run into that problem again.
Exactly. And one of the big criticisms of a platform like OpenStudy is that, well, people can just go on there, post their questions, and get somebody else to do their homework for them. But what I really like about OpenStudy is they have mediators and moderators in the chats, and they're kind of analyzing what's going on. And what they'll do is, it's funny because you'll see the students calling each other out and saying, wait a minute, you're just here to get us to answer all your homework questions. And you'll see people who have been, sort of the expert tutors in the room who will go on and say to another tutor, look, you gave them the answer, but if you were to help them by showing them how you got there, that would be much more meaningful for you and for them. So it's kind of neat to see how people kind of coach each other like that. It's almost like they kind of police themselves. But I love OpenStudy because they've really built gaming theory into it. So as you answer questions, they give you more points, and you get medals for the best answers. And we've got an advisor upstairs. His name is Charlie, and Charlie's like a level 10 on OpenStudy right now, and I'm only like a level 3, and I'm a little bit embarrassed about that. But it makes it fun to go in and help other people, and so that's what we want to leverage, is that kind of peer-to-peer support. It helps us save money on having to hire tutors, and then we can really have a model that's a lot more scalable. So yeah.
No, so OpenStudy is really great. 24 hours a day, things like that.
Yep.
Students can essentially go from the LMS off to the site to get tutoring help, especially whether or not they're in the LMS. Obviously, you're not in the LMS the entire time you're learning. You could be reading. You're doing your own readings, do other things. But what about something in the course? Is there a reality that, can you put TAs into a course? Can you bring some of that to them as well?
Right. So we've got another advisor. His name is Patrick, and he just came forward with this brilliant idea to take some of our graduate level students, particularly in English, and some of the students who are very strong in math, and put them in as TAs right into our Blackboard courses. Right. So basically, what we would have is students in English composition, for instance, and then we would have this Masters of English student in the class with them, able to provide support whenever that student needs it. So that's another model that we're looking at, and we're kind of figuring out how we can actually use that to help the graduate student in his or her own education, right? So what we're trying to do is build it so that that's actually a course, and it works a lot like an internship or a teaching opportunity, some kind of like a practicum or something like that, so that student, as the graduate student, gets those teaching credits and those opportunities as well, and is able to support our students. So yeah, that's definitely another model that we're looking at.
I think that's really, really cool. And again, it plays into the fact that it's benefiting everyone. It's helping the grad students, helping students. I think it's really cool. I think that's something that's exciting to see expand. Again, to pivot one more time again to talk about something a little bit different. Cool question. So let's go on a little bit more about OpenStudy. Actually, Lane, one of our SNHU students, is asking a little bit more about. She asked about access to OpenStudy. I sent her a link. So it's available for grad students. So then maybe it's important to expand a little bit so they know that it's not like an institution-only tool. That this is essentially it's open to anybody. Anybody in the world can use it. Schools just help partner with OpenStudy to better facilitate the exchange of information, but you can go ahead and anyone can do this, right?
And that's the advantage to that platform, right? Because I could technically build something like OpenStudy within our student portal, but it would be limited to my students, and if I've only got 2 or 3 of my students logged in at any one point for a certain subject area, that you're not going to get the same level of support as you would with this open platform. So they've got students all over the world logged into OpenStudy, and that can help you at any time. So it's really neat when you go into the math chat room, like I was saying earlier, there's usually about 150 other people there with you, and they're able to, answer all the questions that you need. And that they're impressive. I mean, I did pretty well in math in high school, but when I'm looking at some of the questions that these students are answering, I mean, they're hitting up calculus, they're hitting up statistics, they're, hitting up all kinds of quantitative analysis questions in there. So it truly is college level work. I think the statistics that Preeta was sharing with us was saying that about 60% of the students in OpenStudy are higher ed students. They have a lot of high school students in there as well. And actually some of the high school students that are like a calculus level in high school, they're still able to tutor a lot of our students who are taking finite math, algebra, those kinds of courses. So yeah, it's a phenomenal platform and a lot of resources out there. So it's great to use.
Yeah, OpenStudy.com. There's some other ones out there too. There's Tutoring Zone is a tweet that came in, some other ones. So Yeah, definitely. I mean, really cool stuff to check out. I want to bring up a question that came in from Rachel saying, how do you deal with conduct and academic honesty issues with distance learning? Which is a great question. Is it different for distance learning to approach
and there's
like that?
such a huge debate on this, right? So we use Blackboard, and we have, we use the Turnitin software. Some of you probably heard of that. So Turnitin is basically, it's for plagiarism submission. If you've got a paper coming in, you submit that paper to Turnitin, and what it does is it gives you a report back of how much of the content in that paper is from another source, right? So it would say, 20% of this work here looks like it's from another source. Here are the sources that it looks like it's pulled from. And you could actually go in and check to make sure that the student cited all of those sources properly. So that's one way to do it. An interesting question that I recently saw about this, though, was if we're constantly running our student work through a plagiarism checker like that, does that start to create a relationship of distrust with these students? And I don't have the answer for that, but I thought it was really fascinating to kind of ponder because we don't want to create a relationship of distrust where we're constantly saying we don't trust you, that's not your work. But on the other hand, we do have to be able to maintain academic integrity. I think there are a lot of instructors out there that have really, especially the best instructors, they can look at student work and say, you know what, I'm not 100% convinced that this is all of your work. But again, it's just kind of a gut feeling, and so it's nice to have those plagiarism checkers, but I do worry about us going a little bit too far with that, because if you do have that relationship of distrust with your students, it's likely to kind of discourage them more than it is actually going to help them. So
that's a really fair point. I haven't thought about that. It's an interesting issue. I'm really curious. If you guys have any experiences, let us know as well with the hashtag, because it is a really interesting point that clearly the technology exists now to automate so much of that, to assist in it. But at some point, does that go farther than it needs to? Maybe?
Exactly.
It's a good question. So next question we'll bring up is career services. There's some great tweets going out. Eric Stoller, host of Student Affairs Live, he was tweeting about some stuff earlier too, talking about career services and why it's kind of like the forgotten role of student success and student affairs sometimes.
It definitely
is that these shouldn't be living off separately. In a lot of campuses they are. So how do you see career services fitting into a distance model in general?
Well, I'm a firm believer that career services should be completely integrated into the total student experience right from the get-go, almost from the first point of inquiry, because it's important for career services to measure their own performance by getting to the student early on in the process to figure out what that student's goals are. Because if a student is already in a career that they're happy with and they're just looking for the credential to back up their life work, then so be it. We may not need to work with that student so much to help them find work after the fact, but we need to know what the student's needs are right from the beginning so that we can kind of weave career services into the whole process. And so one of the things I'm doing right now is creating a course that's success strategies for online students, and I want to be able to incorporate all of the different support services we offer into this course so that students right from their very first term with us have awareness of all of the services that are being made available to them and get them connected to those services so that they can jump in at any point. So we're definitely going to be working career services into that so that they can start thinking about career right from the beginning. And one of the things that our students often struggle with is this concept of being able to market themselves. And especially when you look at liberal arts education, one of the difficult things is with liberal arts education, you've got your core attributes like critical thinking, global perspectives, an appreciation of diversity, all of these things that we want to teach the students, but they don't always see how course outcomes and program outcomes build up to those things. And I would argue that in a lot of programs, those core competencies like critical thinking and problem solving are more important to be able to talk about once you get into an interview than the fact that you got an A in finite math. They probably don't care what you got in finite math, but if you can show that you've got effective communication skills and you've got these effective problem solving skills, that's going to be really valuable. So career services needs to be completely interwoven into all of the curriculum, I feel like. So with distance learning, we've had our career services department, they're over on the main campus, and as SNHU has been growing. They've been great in trying to accommodate the online students because they do a lot of really cool things like they'll do mock interviews, they'll help with resume reviews, and they do a lot of that stuff remotely. So if we have a mock interview day and we've got all these businesses coming in, we'll set up one of the employers on a camera so that they can Skype with a student and do a face-to-face-ish mock interview with them. So it's great practice, but the reality is that, we're growing so big in our online division that the resources over there are limited, and we need to be able to provide them with better services. So one of the things I'm doing right now is looking to build our own career services department for the College of Online and Continuing Education. So I've just hired a new director of career services who's going to come in and help us build this. And it was a really difficult hire to make because as I'm, interviewing people, we keep having these conversations about sort of traditional, delivery methods. And it's like, if I've got, 15,000 students, you're not as one person going to be able to sit down with each of these students one-on-one and do a resume review. It's just not realistic, and we need a much more scalable model than that. So as I'm interviewing these people, they're asking me questions like, well, eventually once we build this staff of career services advisors up, what do you envision the ratio of advisor to student looking like? You're thinking like 1 to 500, 1 to 1,000. And I think when you start having those conversations, you've already kind of missed the point a little bit, right? Because what we need to do is kind of throw out that traditional notion of, I need to be able to meet with the student one-on-one, and think about ways that we can do this in a much more scalable way and offer more self-service tools, and again, take advantage of things like the peer-to-peer support, right? Mm-hmm. So it's the same theory that we have with the tutoring services. If we can get students who are perhaps, business majors doing our human resources concentration, why wouldn't we take advantage of those students and get them connected to our students that need those resume reviews to see if we can get them to help each other out, and help these students, kind of become experts in resume reviews and those kinds of things so that we can leverage those folks. So it's kind of neat because we have to think about ways that we can do it and have it work for huge populations of students all at once, and that's definitely the challenge. But I've seen a lot of cool things coming through, and the direction that career services is going, they're coming up with, there's a lot of third parties out there that'll do career counseling and things like that, but I still want the student to be able to access that information in real time and to be able to do it quickly. And there's actually this organization called Go Hire Up. It's HIRE, gohireup.com. And it's actually a friend of mine that I went to undergrad with, and we were both acting majors in college and did a lot of improv classes together. But what they did was they came up with these really great ideas about having students use improv as a tool for practicing what you would do in an interview setting, right? And so, they're coming up with all these different, courses and curriculum for, working improvisation into teaching these students career services. And one of the neat things about this organization is they're looking to come up with an online interactive game, basically, so that students wouldn't necessarily have to do this with somebody one-on-one. They could actually go right into some kind of an online interaction and get all kinds of different random interview questions and things like that thrown at them. So I'm really excited about the direction of career services, but I think we've really got a long way to go on that still.
And there's so many great points going on in the back channel too. There's people talking about incorporating faculty, incorporating the curriculum, because there's two key things too that I think is, for career services, clearly there's some fundamentals, but there's also the idea of like, okay, can you help the student build their portfolio? And what does that mean to build a portfolio and have things to point to in projects to say, this is me demonstrating my skill set already? And is there a chance for them to build the resume with the experiences? One of the challenges I think in distance learning that's been unfortunate that I'm really excited for us to be trying to tackle moving forward is simple things like student clubs and student papers. Is there an online journal? Can you be, I was the editor of our online journal, or I was the chair of this club that talked about business and business ethics and business practices, and I did all these things. And are there the extracurricular opportunities that make it to a student's resume? Right. Are those available to distance learning students? And primarily they haven't been, at least not nearly at the level they are traditionally, and that's an exciting thing. The challenge is, and it goes back to community. It goes how can I connect students? And a great point came in too about connecting with alumni via Skype. So how can I build community? Pull in the alumni, pull in the faculty, get them connecting to students, so students are demonstrating their skill sets, they're making the relationships, they're building the portfolio, and the resume is getting stacked. If you do career services right, I think you're right. It's not just I sat down with someone, looked at the resume, we met one-on-one, or I met with 400 people this year.
Exactly. And I don't think you can eliminate that completely, because you're always going to have that student that needs that individualized attention. But you're right. If we start looking at our alumni and bringing them back in to talk about their success stories, they're kind of our students' biggest motivator, right? So you bring in the alumni, you get them engaged, and ultimately you want our alumni hiring our new grads, right? So if you've got your alumni going out there, they're graduating, they're getting these great jobs, they're moving up through their company, of course we want them to come back and hire more SNHU students. So yeah, I mean, lots of different ways to kind of keep them connected, but going back to sort of the clubs and organizations thing, we have a lot of students jonesing for that. They're saying, look, I want to find different ways to get involved. How can I do that? And so with the online student union concept that we've come up with, we're going to be able to provide students with opportunities to connect through groups through the student portal. So we would set them up with different groups, different affinity groups, based on what we learn about them. We may be able to recommend groups to them so that they can have that opportunity. And not every student is going to engage like that, nor should they have to. It's really sort of a polarity of engagement and disengagement, and the total student experience should allow that student to really kind of weave in and out of that. Like this week I may want to be engaged, next week I just may be too busy, and that's got to be okay. We really have to make sure that we're customizing this for each unique student so that they have the opportunity to engage or disengage as they see fit.
And I think it is all about opt-in, obviously. I mean, there's a tweet out saying there's a huge difference between experiential learning and using students as cheap labor for peer advising. Clearly. Right, obviously all of this is entirely opt-in. It's the students that want to have the additional experience and finding two students that have an opportunity and a desire and pairing them together. Right. And it's bringing them together that then is scalable. Because they're helping each other, but it's clearly not forcing students to do what they don't want to do.
No, and that's why it's neat for, with the tutoring model we were talking about, for you to be able to bring in graduate students and give them credit in order to use this teaching and tutoring experience in order to develop that life credit. Yeah, we're not taking advantage of our students. That's not the point. I mean, the point is for us to be able to, of course we want to be able to leverage that because they've got great talent. And what we're seeing in things like Open Study and these different platforms is that I think sometimes we underestimate the goodness of people and the willingness of these students they want to help each other, they want to support each other, and that's kind of an exciting thing. So yeah, I don't see it as taking advantage of them as much as I see that as giving them this great opportunity to learn themselves.
Totally, and I think one point too, there's a tweet that came about internships as well. One of the cool things we've seen is students essentially taking their own, creating their own virtual internships. And it's not something that we have a huge program on. I think it's students going out and literally, if they're a distance learning student, finding companies where they want to go out and have an internship and saying, can I intern with you and I'll do it remotely. We're seeing more and more in professional work environments that people are working remotely.
Absolutely.
And what is the reality of a distance learning internship? And that's something I'm just wrapping my head around. And that's not something we formally do, but we're seeing our own students going out and saying, I went and did this and I'm interning with an ad agency, but I'm 2,000 miles away, and I'm just helping them out with things and projects, and that's an untapped opportunity. I feel like there's just a wealth of untapped options like that we're kind of almost tripping over. It's kind of exciting.
Exactly, and where we're an innovative institution that focuses highly on technology, and where we have a lot of business programs, a lot of organizational leadership programs. We teach virtual teaming. We teach this idea of bringing together the best minds from all over the country or all over the world in order to get the best person for the job that you have at hand. So distance internships is absolutely the logical next step to that. I mean, of course we should be embracing technology and getting students connected with employers that way. Absolutely.
So, we're kind of coming to slightly towards the end of the show. We've covered a lot of ground on this topic. Clearly, it was we got to gloss over what we can, talk as fast as we can. It's one of the most exciting things for me. But before we do wrap, let's tackle the big summary question. So, what are the biggest challenges that you face and that you think people, in distance learning institutions are facing when they're looking at how to provide student services in this kind of environment?
Well, one of the toughest things that I've been facing since I've come on board is whether or not to use third-party vendors to help us with the support services or whether to build our own in-house. And it's a tough decision, and sometimes you might want to even play around a little bit with both, and so we certainly have a lot of pilot programs and things like that we do. But one of the things we struggle with is we want their experience at SNHU to feel like one experience, right? We don't want them to feel like they've got 8 different usernames and passwords for 8 different systems that they have to log in and out of, and they can never remember this password for that and this password for that. So we want it to feel like one user experience. And the other thing is it can get a little bit confusing when you have an academic advisor, but also this third party who is, perhaps a success coach, or another third party who is a career counselor and all these other things. It gets confusing for the student because they don't know who to go to talk to what issues at that point, and we don't want that to be a confusing thing for them. So, one of the challenges is deciding whether or not to use third-party vendors or to build our own in-house. And of course, we're trying a little bit of everything, and so that's why I like being able to team with people like, organizations like Open Study, and to be able to still do our own peer-to-peer support, through the student portal, and kind of try a little bit of all of those things. So that's one of the big things. There's certainly cost implications of each, but we just kind of try a little bit and see what works best for the students. And so we're constantly asking the students, did this work for you? Did you prefer this method over that method? And we really let them kind of drive our decision making for us. One of the other, difficult things is obviously hiring the right people to come in and, take on these roles. When I was hiring for a director of student success, a director of student success, for a director of career services, I was looking for a very specific skill set and somebody that's not afraid to have these outside of the box conversations, and to really, one of the first things I said to them was, I kind of want you to throw out everything you know about traditional career services and see how we would build this from the ground up for online. That doesn't mean that, a lot of the traditional, career service approaches are not going to work for our students, because of course they will. All the underlying theory is still the same, but the delivery method's got to be completely different. So finding the people that are not afraid to have those conversations and are not afraid of how big this might get, right? So that's kind of a neat thing.
So a question came in, and let's move on. It said, so what are the skills or qualities you're looking for in those folks? And it's a good question. So for the folks that are in this community in general now and want to be on the forefront of a really, rapidly expanding industry and challenge, what are the kind of skills or qualities that you think fit for something like this?
Use of technology and an understanding of social media tools and those sorts of things are absolutely imperative. And, as I was interviewing, I had a couple of recruiters come to me and say, hey, I think I've got the right person for this. Can I set you up with a phone interview? And I was like, you know what? No, I'd really prefer a Skype interview with this person. And they're like, oh, I don't know if they, can do that. And I'm like, well, if they can't do that, then already they're a no, They need to be able to understand those tools and be really comfortable using them. And then I want somebody that's got that innovative spark and is not afraid to think about what higher education is going to look like in 10 years. Because one of the things we really pride ourselves here at SNHU on is being at the forefront of that curve, right? And we want to make sure that we're really driving what that future looks like, and not afraid to talk about, what different learning models are going to look like. What if we were to throw out the traditional notion of, the credit hour? What was that going to look like? So people that are excited to have those conversations and really excited and driven by student success. That's kind of what I'm looking for in my hires.
Totally. And I will say, hiring a community manager, right?
Hiring a community manager, most definitely. So one of the things, so we're talking about this online student union, and we think we've come up with the right technology tools that we're going to put into our online student union, but I am looking for an online community manager to come and help us drive this, and to really, make sure that we're using the right tools to help us get these groups set up, to help get the students engaged, to help us measure this, figure out how we measure that engagement, and to help us really, completely revolutionize the way we deliver our student services. And that's kind of the neat thing about these tools is, for our academic advisors, if I'm logged into our customer relationship management system and I've got my list of advisees there, I'm going to see a little green light next to all the students that are online right now. So we're now able to connect with them on a whole different level. We can invite them to a video chat. We can invite them, send them a message on their newsfeed, send them a quick notification because we can see that they're online. So it's going to completely shift up the way that we get in contact with our students, and I think it's going to be a really neat thing for student services along the line. So we're looking for an online community manager, somebody who's got a lot of social media experience, web design experience, but really is passionate about student success and building community in an online environment like that. Yeah.
And I think that's the other thing is the passion is what's so cool. For anyone that's in distance learning, I would hope in whatever institution, people that are really excited that this is changing, and you can implement change quickly. It's not a matter of I need to build a new brick and mortar building and build a new office or anything else. Like, you can implement things very quickly, measure them very quickly, and really see what's working, what's not, and pivot and change and innovate.
Absolutely.
It's really, in my opinion, I've been at SNHU now for almost a year. It's the thing that is most exciting to me is the fact that we're constantly going to be changing what the student experiences is and making it stronger, better, and helping students succeed. Because at the end of the day, obviously, that's what this is providing all of these services, whatever they are. We talk about career service, we talk about tutoring, we talk about all sorts of different things today. Whatever they are, providing them better and doing a better job of that is going to help students succeed. And the cool thing I love about distance learning is it's scalable. So the more we help students succeed, the more students we can help succeed. And it can grow very, very quickly. And that's important because I think the world needs access to affordable education.
It definitely does. And we're seeing that, with our students, their needs and their values are constantly shifting. They're constantly evolving. And we've got to be, on top of that evolution. They're going to have different needs at different times. And as they become more tech savvy, as they get busier in their lives, we need to make sure that we're delivering our services in a way that it gets to them quickly.
Yeah, and that's what it says. It sounds like Matt's looking to hire the type of people who work at higher ed startups. Absolutely, actually. I've found, we obviously, I have strong relationships with a lot of different higher ed startups, as is Matt. We have folks from Open Study come to visit. We're sponsored and close with the folks from Integral out in San Francisco. That's actually exactly the kind of thing we're looking for. Very fast-paced, very numbers-driven. Data always behind decisions. It's important to have passion. Yeah. It's important to follow your heart, but you should also measure how your heart's doing and make different decisions.
And stay on top of
and that's a really strong thing with startups. I totally agree. That's one thing I love about the ed tech industry. And that's one last thing. We can't get into it, but that's the power of outsourcing. What's really cool is that that ed tech scene is doing this. If we can lean on things like Open Study and work with different things, because people are out there on the forefront utilizing technology to make cool new tools, to make new cool platforms, and then institutions like us can then go ahead and use them and partner with them. And I only hope that partnership grows. I think people talk a lot of times about how higher ed is in a bubble and things are going to change and all this stuff. And obviously we are in an industry that is very quickly entering a point of no return where we're going to have to change one way or another. Where you're going to see the success, though, in my opinion, is in distance learning models, because we are the closest, I think, into partnering with the ed tech companies that are out there already innovating, making huge strides. And those companies making huge strides, and when they're looking for partners, they're going to find partners in distance learning institutions that want to partner with them quickly and make a difference. And they're going to be able to see the difference very quickly. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest success stories coming out of the next 2 to 3 years. Is institutions like SNHU or other schools that are partnering with, whether it's for-profit companies or non-profit companies that are companies that provide technology and tools, and helping us utilize them to work with students to provide really kick-ass non-profit education. So that's a really cool. I think that's one of the most exciting spots to watch. If you guys aren't reading, there's a newsletter called EdSurge that comes out every week. If you guys aren't reading that, read it. It's full of news all about ed tech, keeping people up to date with what's going on. That's the kind of thing that it's important, I think, for whoever you're looking for any job, is someone who's I want to know what all the tools are. I want to know every option I have. Someone who can't sleep at night because they're obsessed with, did I miss a tool that could have helped a student? At the end of the day, the work we're doing is changing lives. Traditional schools as well, obviously, but
of course. So there's always going to be a market for that. But the online realm is growing so fast. We've got to be on it. We've got to be on it and revolutionize along with that.
Totally. So last question for you, Matt. It's the easiest one of the day. We got a question coming in just asking you what's your Twitter handle. So
at Matt Thornton 47. And that's it. You're gonna have to throw it up there, though.
So I'll tweet it out in just a second and get that out to you.
Yeah, we'll put it up there.
All right, so listen, guys, that actually brings us to the end of the program. That was an action-packed hour talking about student services in distance learning environments. I really appreciate you guys joining us. It's something that we have this kind of conversations internally all the time.
Every day.
Literally, we have a standing meeting on Wednesdays where we just talk about this stuff.
That's exactly right.
And we can't pass it in the hallway without stopping, and it's like that with everybody here. I think it's important, though, too, that we don't move so quickly that we don't turn around and have this conversation as an industry. Right. Because at the end of the day, if we learn together, we're only benefiting more students and more people.
Most definitely. When you learn, you win.
Yeah. So I really appreciate you guys tuning in and being a part of this. I hope to tackle kind of subject like this more often. I'm really excited to let you guys get a glimpse that we're doing SNHU. If you have similar stories, we saw some great tweets coming with examples from what you guys are doing. Keep them coming, because I really want to hear what's going on. If you have something great going on, maybe we'll have you on the show and talk about it further. I really appreciate it. And with that, this has been Higher Ed Live. I'm your host, Seth Odell. This is my guest, Matt Thornton. We are from SNHU in Manchester, New Hampshire at the Mill Yard. And I'll be signing off back next week with a really exciting show with the one and only Patrick Powers and Todd Sanders, talking all about Facebook changes and what it means for you. Facebook has made a lot of changes outside of the whole IPO thing that have impacted how higher education institutions can utilize Facebook. And we're going to break all those down in a rapid-fire 45-minute show going over roughly about 25 different changes and tell you exactly what you need to know, link to case studies of folks that are doing it right. I mean, guys, it's going to be 45 minutes of Facebook in your face. So I am Seth Odell. Catch all the extra episodes that you'll ever want to see over at higheredlive.com. Thanks for watching.